My name is Salima, and at 27 years old, I never expected to be standing in my childhood home with a suitcase, staring down my father as he uttered those words that changed everything. Growing up in Seattle with my younger brother, Oberon, I always knew there was favoritism, but nothing prepared me for the day Dad explicitly said I existed to work, while Oberon deserved to enjoy life. What they never realized was just how much they financially depended on me. Before I dive into how everything fell apart, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like button if you've ever had to stand up to family inequality. I grew up in Maple Valley, a middle-class neighborhood in Seattle. Our house was modest but comfortable, a two-story home with gray siding and white trim that my father, William, was always proud of maintaining. Dad worked as an engineering supervisor for a local tech company, putting in long hours and coming home with stories about software projects across the city. Mom, Amy, worked part-time as a school administrator, though she always described it as just helping out rather than a real career. Then there was Oberon, my brother, 3 years younger than me and clearly the favorite child from the moment he was born. I still remember the day they brought him home from the hospital, my father beaming with pride as he carried the blue bundle through the door. "Look, Salima," he said, his voice filled with awe. "This is your baby brother. One day, he's going to do great things." Even at 4 years old, I noticed something in the way he looked at Oberon that I'd never seen when he looked at me. It wasn't that my parents didn't love me, but their love for Oberon always seemed to shine brighter, like the difference between a desk lamp and stadium floodlights. The different treatment became more obvious as we grew up. Every Christmas and birthday, Oberon would get the newest gaming systems, art supplies, or music equipment, while I received practical gifts like clothes or books from the discount store. When I mentioned this once when I was 9, my mother simply said, "Girls are easier to please, sweetheart. Boys need more encouragement." Despite the lack of parental support, I excelled academically. By middle school, I was consistently bringing home straight A's, staying up late to study, and joining academic clubs. My report cards would go on the refrigerator for a day or two before being replaced by Oberon's art projects or photos from his music recitals. "Your sister's the smart one," my father would tell people, but it always sounded like an afterthought, not an achievement worth celebrating. When Oberon had a performance, my parents rearranged their schedules to attend, cheering from the audience and taking him for dinner afterward, regardless of how well he performed. When I won the regional math competition in 8th grade, neither of them came. Mom had a spa appointment she couldn't reschedule, and Dad needed to drive Oberon to guitar practice. "We're so proud of you, honey," Mom said when I showed her my trophy. "But you know these things come easily to you. Oberon has to work harder for his accomplishments." The irony of that statement wouldn't hit me until years later. High school brought even more stark differences in our treatment. At 16, I got my first job at the local bookstore, working weekends and summers to save for college. Oberon, meanwhile, was encouraged to focus solely on his creative pursuits. "Your brother has natural artistic talent," Dad would say whenever I suggested Oberon might benefit from learning responsibility through a part-time job. "We can't distract him from that potential." My dream was to become a financial analyst. I love working with numbers, finding satisfaction in the precision and logic of financial systems. When I talked about college applications during my junior year, my parents nodded vaguely. "Community college is practical," my mother suggested. "You could live at home and keep helping out." For Oberon, they discussed prestigious art schools with expensive programs, regardless of the tuition costs. "We'll figure it out," Dad assured him. "Your talent deserves the right showcase." The summer before my senior year, I overheard a conversation between my parents that crystallized the dynamic that had been building my entire life. They were sitting on the back porch thinking I was still at work. "Oberon's art teacher thinks he could get into that private arts academy," my father was saying, excitement in his voice, "but we'll need to cover most of the tuition." "What about Salima's college fund?" my mother asked. There was a pause before my father responded. "She's always been independent. She'll understand that Oberon needs the opportunity more. She can get student loans or work through school. She's good at working." That was the first time I heard it stated so explicitly. I was good at working. Oberon was good at enjoying opportunities. It was that simple in their minds. I understood, though not in the way they expected. I understood that I would need to forge my own path. That night, I sat at my desk and mapped out a plan. I would apply for every scholarship I could find. I would work extra shifts. I would make my own way because no one else was going to make it for me. By the time graduation rolled around, I had secured enough scholarships and grants to attend our state university without touching the college fund that had been apparently reassigned to Oberon. My parents seemed surprised but relieved. "We always knew you'd figure it out," my mother said, as if my success was a foregone conclusion that required no support from them. "You've always been so capable," my father added. "See, everything works out. Now we can focus on getting Oberon into the right program." That summer, while working 60-hour weeks between two jobs to save additional money for expenses, I watched Oberon sleep until noon, work on his art projects, and attend expensive workshops that my parents paid for. When I mentioned the disparity, my father gave me a look that would come all too familiar in the years ahead. "You have different paths," he said firmly. "You're building character. Oberon is building a future." What neither of them realized was that I was building a future too, just not one they had chosen for me, and certainly not one that would ultimately benefit them the way they expected. State University wasn't my dream school, but it had a solid finance program and was affordable with my scholarships and part-time work. I moved into a tiny apartment with my roommate Thessaly, who quickly became the supportive presence I'd never had at home. While most freshmen were adjusting to freedom and attending parties, I was juggling a full course load with 20 hours a week at the campus bookstore and another 15 hours waiting tables at a restaurant near campus. Meanwhile, Oberon had managed to secure a partial arts scholarship to attend a private creative academy about 2 hours away, with my parents covering the substantial remaining costs. 3 weeks into my first semester, I got a call from my mother. "Salima, honey, we're a little short this month," she began, her voice carrying that familiar tone of manufactured helplessness. "The payment for Oberon's studio materials was higher than we expected. Could you send home $200 to help with the utilities?" I stared at my phone in disbelief. I was barely making ends meet myself, eating ramen noodles and using the campus shuttle to avoid gas expenses. "Mom, I don't have extra money. I'm paying for my own books and food." Her voice cooled immediately. "We've given up a lot to support you kids. Your father and I thought you'd be more understanding about family helping family." The guilt trip worked that time. I picked up extra shifts, skipped buying the textbook for my economics class, and sent them the money. But that first request opened a floodgate. Soon, helping with utilities became a monthly expectation. When their car needed repairs, when the water heater broke, when property taxes were due, the call would always come to me. Thessaly noticed the toll it was taking. One night, after I hung up from another call with my mother about money, she confronted me. "This isn't normal, Salima. Parents are supposed to help their children through college, not the other way around." "They help Oberon," I said reflexively, then realized how that sounded. Thessaly's eyes widened. "And that doesn't strike you as messed up? Why aren't they asking him for money?" "He needs to focus on his art and school," I repeated my father's constant refrain, but the words sounded hollow even to me. "And you don't need to focus on school? You're carrying a 4.0 GPA while working 35 hours a week. When do you get to just be a college student?" I had no answer for that. The truth was, I'd never been allowed to just be anything. I was defined by what I could provide, not who I was. During my sophomore year, Oberon lost his art scholarship due to poor grades. Rather than facing consequences, my parents simply absorbed the additional cost and increased their financial demands on me. That Christmas, sitting in our living room watching Oberon unwrap a new digital art tablet while I received a sweater from a discount store, I realized nothing had changed since childhood. "We're so proud of your grades," my mother said, noticing my expression, "but Oberon needed a pick-me-up after a rough semester." By junior year, I had moved up to assistant manager at the restaurant, which helped cover the increasing demands from home. I was exhausted, constantly falling asleep over textbooks and surviving on coffee and determination. But I maintained my GPA and started applying for internships, knowing that building my resume was my only path to eventual freedom. Oberon dropped out of the academy entirely that year, moving back home where my parents welcomed him with open arms and understanding. "College isn't for everyone," my father said. "Oberon needs time to find his path." When I graduated with honors in finance the following year, my parents attended the ceremony but left early because Oberon had an art show opening at a local gallery. My graduation dinner was postponed and eventually forgotten. The framed photo in their living room wasn't of me in my cap and gown, but of Oberon at his high school graduation 4 years earlier. Networking at a campus job fair, I landed an entry-level position at Sterling Financial, a respected investment firm in Seattle. The starting salary wasn't impressive, but it offered health benefits and growth potential. Most importantly, it was a step toward independence. With student loans coming due and little savings despite years of working, I made the difficult decision to move back home temporarily. Just for 6 months, I told myself, just until I can save a security deposit and first month's rent. My parents seemed pleased with the arrangement, though not for the reasons I'd hoped. "It'll be so nice having you contribute to the household properly," my mother said, as if I hadn't been sending them money throughout college. Within a week of starting my new job, the expectations became clear. My entire first paycheck went to catching up on household bills. My second paycheck covered groceries and the property tax installment. By the third month, I was paying half the mortgage while Oberon continued living at home cost-free, spending his days working on art projects and talking about nebulous opportunities in the creative field. "Your brother is networking," my father would say when I pointed out that Oberon rarely left his room except to raid the refrigerator that I had stocked. "He needs to build his portfolio. That's how artists get noticed these days." The 6-month timeline I had set for myself stretched to 9 months, then a year, as every dollar I tried to save somehow found its way into my parents' hands or household expenses. Despite the financial drain at home, I excelled at Sterling Financial. Numbers had always made sense to me in a way people often didn't, and I found satisfaction in analyzing market trends and identifying investment opportunities for clients. My supervisor, Margaret, took notice of my dedication and attention to detail. She said, "You have a real gift," she told me after I completed a particularly complex portfolio analysis ahead of schedule. "If you keep this up, you won't be entry-level for long." She was right. By the 18th month mark, I received my first promotion to junior analyst along with a modest salary increase. I should have been ecstatic, but the news was met with an immediate increase in my expected household contribution. "That's wonderful, honey," my mother said when I announced my promotion at dinner. "Now you can take over the car insurance payments for both vehicles." My father nodded in agreement. "And the roof will need replacing next year. We should start setting aside for that." Not once did either of them suggest that my increased earnings might mean I could finally move out and start my own life. The unspoken assumption was that my purpose was to support the family while Oberon pursued his increasingly vague artistic aspirations. At 25, Oberon had yet to hold a job for longer than 2 weeks. He had briefly worked at an art supply store but quit because the schedule interfered with his creative process. He had tried selling his artwork online but stopped because buyers didn't appreciate his unique vision. Meanwhile, he continued living rent-free, eating food I paid for, using utilities I covered, and occasionally borrowing money he never repaid. "I'll pay you back when I get my big break," he would say with an easy smile, as if a gallery contract was just around the corner, rather than a rapidly fading fantasy. The resentment grew inside me like a dense, heavy stone. Each morning, as I dragged myself out of bed at 5:30 to prepare for a long workday, I would hear Oberon snores from his room, knowing he wouldn't rise until well past noon. Each evening, when I returned home exhausted, I would find evidence of his day scattered around the house. Dirty dishes in the sink, art supplies left out, canvases propped against furniture I had helped pay for. "Could you ask Oberon to clean up after himself?" I asked my mother one evening after finding the kitchen in disarray for the third time that week. She looked surprised by the request. "He's been working on a major piece today. You know how he gets when he's in the creative zone. It's easier if we just take care of it." We, meaning me, of course. My mother rarely lifted a finger to clean up Oberon's messes anymore, having long ago assigned that task to me as well. The turning point in my perspective came from an unexpected source. Casimir Sterling was a fellow analyst who would join the firm around the same time I had. We had collaborated on several market research projects, and a friendship had developed between us. During a lunch break, I found myself venting about my home situation. "So, basically," Casimir summarized after listening to my complaints, "you're working 60 hours a week between your job and home responsibilities, paying most of the household expenses while your brother contributes nothing, and your parents enable him. Put so bluntly, it sounded absurd. They're family," I said weakly. "Family helps family." Casimir set down his sandwich and looked me directly in the eyes. "Salima, that's not family helping family. That's you being exploited by the people who should be supporting you." No one had ever named it so clearly before. Exploitation. The word rattled around in my head for days afterward. Was that what was happening? Had I been so conditioned to put everyone else's needs before my own that I couldn't recognize when the arrangement had become toxic? With Casimir's perspective opening my eyes, I decided to have a calm, rational discussion with my parents about fairness and contribution. I practiced what I would say, focusing on solutions rather than accusations. I even created a spreadsheet showing household expenses and suggested a more equitable division based on who was earning income. I chose a Sunday evening when everyone was home after a dinner that I had cooked and would later clean up afterwards. "I'd like to talk about household expenses," I began, sliding my neatly prepared spreadsheet across the table. "I've been covering about 80% of the bills, and I think we need a more balanced approach." My father barely glanced at the spreadsheet. "We're family, not roommates. We don't nickel and dime each other." "I'm not trying to nickel and dime anyone," I explained, "but I can't save anything from my own future at this rate. I think Oberon could contribute something now that he's an adult." My mother looked offended. "Your brother is pursuing his dreams. That takes dedication and support." "I have dreams too," I said quietly. "I'd like to have my own place someday, maybe go back for my master's degree." My father waved his hand dismissively. "There's plenty of time for that later. Right now, this family needs your help. Oberon needs to focus on his opportunities without distractions." "Opportunities that never seem to materialize?" I muttered, immediately regretting the words. "That's a terrible thing to say," my mother gasped. "Just because you settled for an ordinary job doesn't mean Oberon should limit himself." Settled? The word stung, as if my career that I had worked incredibly hard for was some sort of consolation prize. "I'm not trying to limit Oberon," I tried again. "It's about everyone contributing fairly." "You're being dramatic," my father concluded, standing up to signal the end of the discussion. "And selfish. This conversation is over." As I cleared the dishes that night, watching Oberon return to his art studio without offering to help, I realized that Casimir was right. I wasn't part of a mutually supportive family unit. I was enabling a toxic pattern that would continue indefinitely unless I found the courage to change it. The week that everything finally came to a head was already stressful enough without family drama. Margaret Financial was conducting a major audit for our biggest client, and as one of the analysts assigned to the project, I was putting in 12-hour days at the office. Margaret had hinted that my performance on this audit could lead to another promotion, so I was determined to deliver exceptional work despite my exhaustion. After a particularly grueling Thursday at the office, I arrived past 8, dreaming of a hot shower in my bed. Instead, I walked into chaos. Music blared from the living room. Empty takeout containers and beer bottles littered every surface. The distinct smell of paint thinner hung in the air, mixing unpleasantly with spilled alcohol and cigarette smoke. In the center of it all was Oberon, surrounded by 5 equally disheveled friends, critiquing each other's artwork while sprawled across furniture that I actually paid for last Christmas as a family gift. "What is going on?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the noise. Oberon glanced up briefly. "Oh, hey, sis. Just having some of the artist collective over. There's no Chinese food left, but help yourself to a beer." I noticed something on the coffee table that made my blood run cold. "Is that my credit card?" One of Oberon's friends had the decency to look uncomfortable, but Oberon just shrugged. "Yeah, we needed food and supplies for the critique session. I'll pay you back." "How? With what money?" I snapped the card from the table. "Chill out," Oberon said, turning back to his canvas. "Dad said it was fine." Of course he did. My father had apparently given Oberon permission to use my credit card in my absence without even a courtesy text to warn me. The familiar anger rose in my chest, but there was something new alongside it: determination. "Everyone who doesn't live here needs to leave," I announced, walking to the stereo and switching it off. "Now." There were groans of protest, but something in my expression made Oberon's friends gather their art supplies and leave. Only my brother remained, glaring. "What's your problem? They're my guests." "This place is a disaster. You used my credit card without permission," I said. "Whatever, you're always dramatic." The phrase, echoing my father, lit a fire in me. I was tired of being dismissed and used. "Clean this up tonight. We'll discuss the charge at dinner tomorrow." The next morning, I found over $300 charged to my card. It was the last straw. I resolved to confront them that evening. When I came home, my mother was cooking, rare enough to make me wary. At dinner, I tried to bring up the card, but my father spoke first. "Oberon's been accepted to an art residency in New York. It cost $5,000 plus travel. We think it's worth it." "And you expect me to pay?" I asked. "We're a family," my father said. "We support each other's dreams." "What about mine?" I demanded. My father's face hardened. "We gave you a roof, values, a job. Your brother needs support now." "With my money?" I shot back. "While he charges parties to my card?" "It was small," my mother said. "300 isn't small when I already pay for everything." "Enough," my father thundered. "You work while your brother pursues greatness. If you don't like it, get out." Silence followed. In that moment, I understood. They saw me only as a resource. "Fine," I said. "I'll leave and you can pay your own bills." They were stunned. My mother stammered. "Where would you go?" "Anywhere I'm respected," I replied. "I'll be out by the weekend." My father tried to backpedal, but I was finished. "You've made your position clear. Now I've made mine. I'm done being the family ATM." I walked away, ignoring their protests. The truth was spoken, and there was no going back. That night, I made several phone calls. The first was to Thessaly, my college roommate, who had remained a close friend. I explained the situation, and without hesitation, she offered her spare room until I could find my own place. "I've been telling you to leave that toxic situation for years," she said. Stay as long as you need. The second call was to my landlord, since I had been paying what my parents called rent each month. I explained that I would be moving out and asked for documentation of my rental payments. There was an awkward pause. "Miss Johnson," he said slowly, "we don't have you listed as a tenant. The only names on the lease are William and Amy Johnson." This shouldn't have surprised me, but somehow it still stung. Despite paying what they called rent, I had never been officially acknowledged as a tenant, just another way they had kept me contributing without giving me proper status. The third call was to Casimir. I hadn't planned to involve him, but I needed someone who understood the professional side of my life as I reorganized everything. "Do you need help moving?" he asked immediately. "I have a truck." By morning, I had packed my personal belongings, which took less time than I expected. Clothes, books, personal mementos, my laptop, and professional documents. Everything else in the house, despite my financial contributions, I left behind. The furniture I had helped pay for, the appliances I had replaced, the television I had bought last Christmas. Let them see how much I had been providing. My parents hovered anxiously as I packed, alternating between guilt trips and attempts at negotiation. "You're tearing this family apart," my mother said tearfully, "after everything we've done for you." "What exactly have you done for me lately?" I asked calmly as I folded my clothes into suitcases. "Name one sacrifice you've made for me in the past 5 years." She couldn't answer. My father tried a different approach. "Let's be reasonable here. We can work out a more fair arrangement with expenses." "We already tried that discussion," I reminded him. "You shut it down and told me to get out if I didn't like the situation. I'm just following your instructions." Oberon mostly stayed in his room, emerging only once to ask if I was seriously leaving over a few $100s. "No," I told him, "I'm leaving because this family sees me as nothing but a paycheck, and I deserve better." He rolled his eyes and retreated, probably assuming I'd change my mind or that our parents would somehow convince me to stay. He had never faced real consequences before, so he couldn't imagine them now. Casimir arrived with his truck around noon on Saturday. He greeted my parents politely, but coolly, clearly there as my ally. We loaded my belongings efficiently, and within an hour, I was ready to leave the house I had helped maintain and pay for, but had never truly been mine. Standing on the front porch, I faced my parents one last time. "I've left a spreadsheet on the kitchen table," I told them. "It shows all the bills I've been paying and when they're due. You might want to adjust your budget accordingly." My mother's face crumpled. "You can't just leave us with all these expenses. We can't afford everything without you." "You should have thought of that before taking me for granted for so many years," I replied, no longer feeling the guilt that would have consumed me even a day earlier. "Maybe Oberon can get a job." As Casimir and I drove away, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief, sadness, anxiety, and underneath it all, a growing sense of pride. I had finally stood up for myself, set a boundary, and followed through. The financial reality hit my family almost immediately. 3 days after I moved out, my father called. "The electricity bill is due," he said without preamble. "We're a little short this month during the transition. Can you help out just this once?" "No," I said simply. "That's no longer my responsibility." Similar calls came about the water bill, the cable bill, the credit card payment. Each time, my answer was the same: no. A simple, powerful word I had rarely used with my family before. About a week after I left, Oberon called, anger evident in his voice. "Thanks a lot," he spat. "Dad's making me get a job at that coffee shop downtown. Do you know how humiliating that is?" "Welcome to the real world," I replied. "Most people have to work." "But what about my art, my residency opportunities?" "You can work on art after work, like the rest of the world does, or before work, or on your days off. "This is all your fault," he said bitterly. "Everything was fine until you freaked out." "Everything was fine for you," I corrected him. "It was never fine for me." My mother's approach was more emotional. Her calls and texts were filled with guilt and manipulation. "I can't sleep worrying about bills," she texted one night. "Is this how you treat the woman who gave birth to you?" "We gave you everything growing up," she claimed in another message. "A beautiful home, clothes, food. How can you be so ungrateful?" I didn't point out that providing the basics for your child isn't exceptional parenting deserving of lifelong servitude in return. Instead, I maintained firm boundaries. "I'm sorry you're struggling," I would reply, "but I'm not coming back to an exploitative situation." Living with Thessaly was a revelation. We split expenses evenly. We took turns cooking and cleaning. When I contributed to the household, it was acknowledged and reciprocated. It was how family and friends should treat each other, with mutual respect and fairness. About a month after I left, my father made his first awkward attempt at reconciliation. He invited me to lunch at a diner halfway between Thessaly's apartment and their house. I agreed, curious about what he would say now that the financial reality had set in. He looked older somehow, the lines in his face deeper. "We miss you," he said after we had ordered. "Do you miss me, or do you miss my paycheck?" He flinched, but didn't deny it. "Things have been difficult. We've had to make a lot of adjustments." I had to make adjustments my entire adult life to support this family. Now, it's someone else's turn. Oberon got a job. He's not happy about it, but he's working 20 hours a week at the coffee shop. Good for him. Your mother had to increase her hours at the school. I picked up some weekend consulting work. I nodded, but offered no sympathy. These were normal adult responsibilities they should have been handling all along. "We may have been unfair to you," he finally conceded, although the words seemed difficult for him. "Taking you for granted." Yes, you were unfair. And if we're going to have any relationship moving forward, that needs to change. We parted with no promises made, no dramatic reconciliation, just a small acknowledgement that the old dynamic was broken and something new would need to take its place. The 6 months after leaving my parents' home were transformative. Without the financial drain and emotional burden of supporting my family, I thrived in ways I hadn't thought possible. I found an affordable one-bedroom apartment of my own, decorated exactly to my taste for the first time in my life. I started saving money toward my long-deferred dreams, opening a separate account specifically for a master's degree fund. At work, freed from constant exhaustion, my performance reached new heights. Margaret noted the change during my performance review. "You've always been dedicated," she observed, "but lately there's a spark that wasn't there before. Whatever changes you've made in your personal life, they're working for you professionally too." I received another promotion, this time to senior analyst, with a significant salary increase. The irony wasn't lost on me that my family would have seen this as an opportunity to extract more financial support had I still been living with them. My relationship with Casimir evolved from friendship to something deeper. He had been there during the most difficult transition of my life, offering support without judgment. Our first official date was to a financial planning seminar, which might sound boring to some, but perfectly matched our shared interests. To financial independence, he toasted at dinner afterward, raising his glass with a smile that made my heart flutter. And personal independence, I added, clinking my glass against his. While my personal and professional lives blossomed, I maintained limited contact with my family. Brief phone calls with my mother every couple of weeks, occasional text exchanges with my father. They had stopped asking for money directly, though hints and suggestions still slipped into almost every conversation. "The washing machine is making a strange noise," my mother would mention casually. "Such an expensive repair ahead." I would simply commiserate without offering assistance. "That's tough. Appliance repairs can be costly." Oberon and I barely spoke. From what I gathered through my parents, he continued working at the coffee shop, gradually increasing his hours as the reality of adult responsibilities settled in. Part of me felt sad about the distance between us, but another part recognized that our relationship had never been built on mutual respect or genuine connection. It had been built on his entitlement and my acquiescence, neither of which made for a healthy sibling bond. About 4 months after moving out, I began seeing a therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen, who specialized in family dynamics. Our sessions helped me understand the patterns that had shaped our family for decades. "What you're describing is a classic golden child and scapegoat dynamic," she explained during one session. "Your brother was designated as the family's hope for success, while you were assigned the role of supporter and provider." "But why?" I asked. "Why would parents set up such an unbalanced system?" "Often it stems from the parents' own resolved issues or unfulfilled dreams," Dr. Chen suggested. "Your father may have seen creative potential in your brother that he wished he had pursued himself. Your supporting role might have reinforced your mother's beliefs about women being caregivers rather than achievers in their own right." These insights didn't excuse their behavior, but they helped me contextualize it. I wasn't wrong or selfish for wanting fairness and reciprocity. I was simply breaking a dysfunctional pattern that had never served me. At the 6-month mark, Oberon texted, "Can we talk in person?" We met at a coffee shop near my apartment. He looked different, more mature, wearing a work uniform. "You look good," he said. "I am happy," I replied. Fidgeting with his cup, he admitted, "I get it now. Why you left. Once I started working, paying bills, I realized how much you were doing, how much I took for granted." It was the most self-aware thing I'd ever heard from him. He went on, "Mom and Dad had to downsize. Dad's truck got repossessed." I felt guilt, but reminded myself these were consequences of their choices. Everyone needs to contribute. That's just adult life. "I know that now," he said. We talked for 2 hours, sharing honesty we'd never managed before. No dramatic apologies, but a new respect. As we parted, he handed me an envelope with $300 for the credit card. Took me a while to save. It wasn't about the money. It was about acknowledgement. The following weekend, I joined a family dinner, our first since I'd left. Tension hung over the table until my father said, cautiously, "We may not have been entirely fair in how we treated you compared to Oberon." It was a weak apology, but an admission nonetheless. "No, you weren't fair. You treated me like an ATM while treating him like a prince." My mother winced. "We never meant to make you feel undervalued." "Intention doesn't change impact," I replied. The conversation was uncomfortable, but I set boundaries. No financial support, no guilt or manipulation. I would be an equal family member, not a provider. They agreed, though more from necessity than true understanding. The balance of power had shifted. They needed me more than they needed them. 1 year after walking out of my parents' house with nothing but my personal belongings and a determination to break free from exploitation, I stood in my own living room, surveying what I had built for myself. My apartment wasn't large or luxurious, but it was entirely mine. decorated according to my taste, maintained according to my standards, and most importantly, paid for with money that I had earned and chosen to spend on myself. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been nights of doubt, moments of loneliness, and the persistent pull of ingrained guilt whenever I chose my own needs over the demands of my family. But with each passing month, the decision to leave had proven itself right 1,000 times over. My career had flourished without the constant drain of supporting 3 additional adults. The promotion to senior analyst had come with a raise substantial enough that I had been able to start taking evening classes towards my master's degree, a dream I had deferred for years while paying my family's bills. The relationship with Casimir had deepened into something I had never experienced before, a partnership of equals who supported each other's goals and respected each other's boundaries. He had recently moved into the apartment next door to mine, a compromise between living together and maintaining our independent spaces. "I'm proud of you," he told me one evening as we shared dinner on my small balcony. "Not many people have the courage to completely reset their family dynamic the way you did." "I didn't feel courageous at the time," I admitted, "just desperate." "Sometimes courage looks like desperation from the inside," he replied with a smile. "It's only in retrospect that we recognize our own strength." My relationship with my family had evolved in ways I couldn't have predicted. The most surprising transformation had been in Oberon. Forced into self-sufficiency, he had gradually developed responsibility and work ethic. He had been promoted to assistant manager at the coffee shop and was taking business classes at the community college. We weren't close, probably never would be, but there was a growing mutual respect between us that hadn't existed during my early childhood and adulthood. My parents had struggled more with the new dynamic. The financial reality of losing my contribution had forced them to downsize to a smaller apartment and take on additional work. My father still occasionally made comments suggesting I should help out, just this once, with various expenses, but he no longer expected compliance. My mother had gradually stopped with the guilt trips as they proved ineffective, though she still sometimes referred wistfully to the time when we all lived together as a family. What they never fully acknowledged was that we hadn't been functioning as a healthy family then. We had been operating as a system of exploitation with me as the primary resource. Real family meant mutual support, respect for boundaries, and recognition of each member's individual worth beyond what they could provide to others. At Sterling Financial, I had been promoted again, this time to portfolio manager, overseeing investment strategies for high net worth clients. The salary increase had allowed me to accelerate my savings goals and begin looking at purchasing my own home within the next 2 years. Margaret had become not just a supervisor, but a mentor, recognizing my potential and advocating for my advancement within the company. "You have executive potential," she told me during my latest performance review. "With your master's degree and continued performance, I could see you in a vice president role within 5 years." The possibility excited me in a way that would have been impossible when I was trapped in the cycle of supporting my family's financial irresponsibility. I had learned painful but necessary lessons through this experience, that love without respect is ultimately hollow, that helping others shouldn't come at the expense of your own well-being, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who cannot see your worth, even when those people are your family. The hardest lesson had been learning to overcome the guilt that had been instilled in me since childhood. The belief that putting my own needs first was somehow selfish or wrong. Dr. Chen had helped me recognize that self-care wasn't selfish, that I couldn't effectively care for others if I was constantly depleted myself. "Think of it like the oxygen mask instructions on an airplane," she had explained. "You have to secure your own mask before helping others. It's not selfishness, it's survival." One unexpected benefit of establishing firm boundaries had been the discovery of my own identity outside of the caretaker role. Without the constant pressure to provide and support, I had found time to explore interests and passions I had never been able to pursue before. I joined a hiking club, took a photography class, volunteered at a financial literacy program for young women. I discovered that I was more than just a responsible worker and reliable provider. I was a whole person with diverse interests, talents, and dreams. The most profound change, however, had been internal. The constant background noise of resentment that had accompanied nearly every interaction with my family had finally quieted. In its place was a sense of calm determination to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or guilt. I no longer felt responsible for my family's poor choices or financial struggles. I could love them without sacrificing myself on the altar of their expectations. As I finished my master's program and considered potential next steps in my career, I felt a freedom that had eluded me for most of my adult life. The freedom to choose based on my own desires rather than others' needs. The future stretched before me not as a burden of responsibility, but as a landscape of possibility. Casimir and I had begun discussing marriage, not as an escape from family dysfunction, but as a partnership between two whole, independent people who chose to build a life together. Our relationship was built on equality, respect, and mutual support, everything my family relationships had lacked. "What kind of wedding do you want?" he asked one evening as we walked along the Seattle waterfront. "Something small," I said, surprising myself with how quickly the answer came. "Just people who genuinely support us, who see us as individuals worth celebrating." "That sounds perfect," he agreed. "Quality over quantity." The conversation made me realize how different my perspective on family had become. Family wasn't just about blood relations or obligations. Family was about people who showed up for you, who respected your boundaries, who celebrated your successes without expecting something in return. Sometimes the greatest act of love, both for yourself and for others, is to break toxic patterns that keep everyone trapped in unhealthy roles. My family might never fully understand or appreciate the gift I gave them by refusing to enable their dysfunction any longer, but I understood it, and ultimately, that was enough. Standing in my apartment that evening, looking out at the city lights through windows that belonged to me, in a space I had created and maintained with my own resources, I felt a deep sense of accomplishment. Not just for the career success or the financial stability, but for the courage to choose my own well-being over others' comfort. The path hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. I had learned that I was worth more than what I could provide to others, that my dreams mattered as much as anyone else's, and that sometimes walking away isn't giving up, it's simply choosing a new path forward. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took you for granted? Remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable toxic behavior, both for your own sake and for theirs. It's not selfish to prioritize your well-being. It's necessary. Thank you for following my journey, and I hope it gives you the courage to stand firm in your own worth, no matter who tries to diminish it.